Good evening. Welcome to the February 20th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. If you're here in council chambers tonight, we're glad you've taken the time to join us. If you're watching at home, we're glad you've joined us there too. And watching at a future date, thanks for taking the time. As is our custom, we'll begin our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose,
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit. Here. Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover,
Here.
Commissioner Tully,
Here.
Commissioner Davenport.
Here. Welcome, everybody. Good to see you tonight. Next item on our agenda, we have a proclamation this evening. This is a new one for us, and it concerns Government Communicators Day. Whereas the role of government communications profession is to inform, educate, and engage their communities, increasing awareness and understanding around topics that affect the health, safety, and well-being of the community. And whereas robust communication in government adds to transparency, builds trust and community pride, and inspires residents to take action and be involved. And whereas government communication creates relationships and calls to action, builds awareness and understanding through storytelling, engages and fosters engagement on civic issues, and uses channels to include people in critical decisions. Whereas it is essential to have strong communications in government because it is a foundational element of living in a democracy where citizens have trust in their government and the freedom to make their voice heard. Whereas residents, businesses, and guests alike depend on government communicators' critical role in times of crisis, emergency, and controversy, which can provide vital information and instill confidence in uncertain times. Whereas the Village of Downers Grove is proud of and has deep gratitude and recognition for our government communicators' professionalism, dedication, hard work, commitment, enthusiasm, and sacrifice. Now therefore, I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim February 24th, 2024 as Government Communicators Day in the Village of Downers Grove, and encourage all residents and businesses to thank the members of the Communication Department who have dedicated their careers to ensure the village has effective, impactful, and successful communication strategies that resonate and are relevant. And I encourage residents and businesses to engage with and avail themselves of the communication efforts of the Village of Downers Grove. Dated this 20th day of February 2024, Downers Grove, Illinois. We have some of our team here to take and receive this. It's kind of fun to see them on the other side of the camera.
How's the group, Mr. Baker? One, two, three. One more. One, two, three.
Kind of fun to do that. Downers has a history of a lot of good communications, even award-winning communications, and other than mentioning those periodically, we've never really taken the time to celebrate them. Is there a motion concerning minutes of previous council meetings?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the February 13th, 2024 minutes as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 5 is our public comments portion for our meeting. This is the portion of the meeting where we take comments on items not on tonight's agenda. There will be opportunities to hit items that are on the agenda at a future point. Got a few comments just to remind everybody that the public comments portion of the meeting we're about to engage is important and valued part of our meeting. It is, however, a one-way street. It is not a question and answer session. Council sessions are not open debates. Those that follow our meetings will recognize this council offers extended commentary opportunity and input and seldom, if ever, cuts anyone off. Beyond tonight's meeting, there are a variety of additional opportunities to engage council members, and we hope that you will avail yourself of all of these. They include our e-remark system, the CRC system, Coffee with the Council, direct email, and by phone. And as I've mentioned before, those one-on-one council conversations are usually the most effective. Your council is listening. If you're making comments tonight and you don't see immediate reactions, please know your council is listening. And sometimes we need a little time to reflect and understand what's been said. If you plan to speak, please keep the following in mind when you come to the podium. Please state your name for the record. Address your comments to me as the chair of the meeting. Keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Avoid repeating what others have already said. And please keep your comments to one visit to the podium per subject, remembering that comments are most effective when made to the council on village governance issues. So we appreciate you all being here tonight and look forward to your participation. If you've got something on your mind, come on down to the podium.
Thank you. Mayor Barnett, members of the council, my name is Dr. Jody Harrop, and I am the chair of the Civic Affairs and Public Policy Committee for Equality Downers Grove, or EQDG. For those of you who don't know us, EQDG is a local nonprofit organization that provides education, support, social action, and advocacy for the LGBTQ community here in Downers Grove. We are proud to be members of this wonderful community, but we have been alarmed by the recent rise in division and hostility, both nationally and locally, targeting the LGBTQ community. In response, we developed a questionnaire to assess the perceptions of Downers Grove residents with regard to how welcoming Downers Grove truly is, and to identify the specific factors contributing to these perceptions. Our goal was to use this data to develop recommendations for changes that can be implemented within our community to create a more inclusive and welcoming environment for all of our residents. Now, I just distributed copies of our full report with the survey attached to members of the council. This describes in detail our findings and our implications. So in the interest of time, I'll direct you to that report in order to gather specifics regarding our assessment methods and our quantitative demographics describing our participants. So I'll skip over those slides because you can easily see them in your report. Of note, though, about 60% of our respondents identified as members of the LGBTQ community, while about 40% identified as allies or non-members. Now, LGBTQ community members were asked about specific factors causing them to feel welcomed and supported in Downers Grove establishments and settings. Responses, as listed on the slide, include both visible and verbal demonstrations of inclusivity and support, such as displaying pride symbols, hiring queer employees, etc. LGBTQ respondents were also asked about specific factors or actions taken by Downers Grove establishments or settings causing them to feel unwelcome or marginalized. Responses, as listed, reflected concerns about the refusal to participate in visual demonstrations of inclusivity, as well as about the lack of clear action steps taken by schools, businesses, local government, and community members in identifying, denouncing, and administering consequences for LGBTQ harassment. LGBTQ members also proffered that the biggest hurdles to acceptance of the LGBTQ community here in Downers Grove include lack of representation, lack of information, lack of inclusive educational and social events, and a lack of action in combating misinformation and hate speech at school and library board meetings, in schools, and in community spaces. Suggestions by LGBTQ respondents of ways in which Downers Grove can create a more welcoming environment for all included more opportunities for inclusion via educational and social events, increased visibility, and clear condemnation of and consequences for misinformation, hate speech, and harassment of LGBTQ individuals. Now, what did our allies have to say? Our allies also perceived hurdles to fostering acceptance of the LGBTQ community here in Downers Grove, including a lack of information about the community, the spread of misinformation, incidents of bullying, harassment, and hatred in school and library board meetings and in public spaces, and the lack of action by local officials to identify and administer clear consequences for these instances. Allies also gave suggestions for ways in which Downers Grove could create a more welcoming environment, including providing more social and educational opportunities to learn about marginalized communities, combating misinformation, increasing visibility with inclusive symbols and signage, and clearly denouncing hate speech and harassment. So what does all this data mean for Downers Grove? Of note, there did not appear to be a significant difference between the reported perceptions of allies versus those of LGBTQ community members regarding current hurdles and unwelcoming experiences for the LGBTQ community, as similar observations and obstacles were reported. This indicates that the impact of aversive situations has been recognized throughout the community, regardless of whether or not members identify as LGBTQ. Most of the downtown businesses were recognized as creating a welcoming experience. Visible displays of inclusivity were appreciated by both allies and members of the LGBTQ community as ways of increasing feelings of safety, inclusion, and acceptance. However, almost all respondents reported significant concerns about the threatening and divisive atmosphere in Downers Grove created by hate groups, extremists, and community members at school and library board meetings and throughout community spaces. Our research shows that this has a profound and pervasive impact on respondents' perceptions of Downers Grove, as they report feeling less safe due to both the severity of the vitriol as well as due to the lack of action taken by those in positions of authority in response. Residents stated that they want local officials to clearly condemn hate speech, misinformation, bullying, and harassment, and to take definitive action steps to protect the rights and safety of all community members. Also of note were respondents' reports of the lack of education and awareness around marginalized populations. This lack of exposure to factual information feeds into the creation of a false and often unfavorable narrative based upon misinformation, fear-mongering, and bias. That is why it is critically important to provide educational opportunities, programs, and events in our schools, libraries, and community organizations designed to increase awareness of and acceptance of marginalized groups. EQDG is proud to support the Downers Grove community, and we hope that this info and recommendations will provide valuable guidelines for implementing changes within the village to ensure that Downers Grove remains a welcoming, safe, and inclusive place for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Other subjects not on tonight's agenda?
Hi. Hi, my name is James Kelly. I was planning to do something totally different tonight. I spent the day in and out Daisies. I started from a new owner of a florist in Downers Grove. I was told not to mention it right now because it's not going public with it yet. All the way to downtown, all the way to the Irish American Center. There's a lot of hate out there. I had some experience in it yesterday. I got assaulted yesterday, and I had to beg for my life when I was trying to help somebody in a moving party. The guy literally, with a mental health issue, beat me against my brick wall in my entrance to my office that I'm in the process of moving into. It's not LGB, it's not gay, it's not this, it's not that, it's not white, it's not Irish, it's not Latino. It's hate. There's a lot of hate out there. Today, I probably handed out about 200 of these daisies. This is the only I got left. And people smiled. I had one lady cry because she's like, had some teenagers say, Alex had me. And I had people that were just scared. There's so much scared out there. People are scared. I'm scared. I'm a big guy. This guy yesterday, after I fed him for the last 2 days, I asked him to leave the office. I walked into the door, and he flipped on me and started beating me against the wall. I grabbed hold of him, and I basically said, "It's got to stop." He told me to get on my knees and beg for my life. The library is becoming a fester for rights of people. Everybody has a right to speech, freedom, and understanding, but people shouldn't have the right for any kind of hate. To be honest with you, I'm banned from the Downers Grove Library because I got into a discussion and I was threatened by security to leave. My attorney told me, don't leave, wait until the cops come, then leave. I left. There's so much hate out there. There's so much misery. There's so much ugliness. It's horrible. I'm sorry. I'm a little confused. I think I have a slight concussion. I'm dealing with it. But I just want everybody to think about what they can do to make their life a little bit better, their neighbor's life a little bit better, and the anger and the hate. I literally, the first time in my life in a long time, I felt I was going to die last night. And after I fed the guy for 2 days, I mean, some nice Italian foods from Italian friend restaurants that I had, the guy just flipped. And the saddest part about it is, and I'm going to stop this because I'm just babbling. The library has social workers. Instead of kicking people out of the library or dealing with people or babysitting people or just giving them a place to be warm or feeding them a snack, get your social workers out there. Downers Grove has social workers. I've talked to Downers Grove social worker. She literally, I've seen her out there making herself visible. I haven't seen library social workers. I might be wrong. I could be corrected. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Others, subjects not on tonight's agenda? Okay, we will continue then. Next up is our consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2 passes unanimously. We do not have a first reading tonight. We have no new subjects to introduce or subjects to continue on. So we'll move on with our active agenda. Is there a motion concerning a planned unit development?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance approving an amendment to Plan Unit Development Number 31 to construct a new multifamily residential development as presented.
Second.
Any audience comments or questions about this item? Council comments or questions? Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Davenport?
Aye.
Commissioner Tully?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That passes unanimously. Is there a motion concerning a plat of subdivision?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt a resolution approving a final plat of subdivision for 3201, 3211, 3221, and 3231 Wood Creek Drive as presented.
Second.
Any audience questions or comments on this item? Council comments or questions? Just for those watching at home, if tonight's your first meeting, go back and review the last week. We have a change to a planned unit development. The area of Esplanade, which is mostly office buildings, is going to do some adjustment to future land use and will likely include some residential elements. That's what this motion potentially approves. Rose, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Davenport?
Aye.
Commissioner Tully?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That passes unanimously as well. Is there a motion concerning a drive-through?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for 1204 75th Street to permit a second drive-through as presented.
Second.
Audience comments or questions on this item? Council comments or questions? Martin?
Mayor, I'm just thrilled that Commissioner Glover will no longer need to wait as long for his White Castles.
Second.
Dual drive-through White Castle is definitely what's needed. Any other council comments? Rosa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Davenport?
Aye.
Commissioner Tully?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye, that passes unanimously. Just another footnote for those watching at home and trying to keep score. Drive-throughs in Downers Grove require special use permits. It essentially allows the village council a little more oversight into what's going on and how it might affect the neighboring area. In this case, as Martin said, it's really just to get Danny through quicker. So we're good with that. Is there a motion concerning parking provisions?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance amending certain parking provisions as presented.
Second.
Audience questions or comments on this item? Council comments or questions? Rosa, please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Davenport?
Aye.
Commissioner Tully?
Aye.
Commissioner Glover?
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye, that too passes unanimously. I'm not going to get into any details on that. I always do feel a little odd when we have a series of things that we pass and nobody has any comments from the council or the audience. For those that are here or watching at home, if you're not in tune with our process, these are items that were always have been talked about at least one meeting prior, often multiple meetings. And so what happens is sometimes we get to this point and frankly, all the questions are answered. And that's where we are tonight, so. Item 8 is the mayor's report. That was it. Item 9, council member reports. This is an opportunity for council members to report out on goings-on in the community, other groups they're connected to, or things they think we want to let folks know about. So, Mike, let's start with you.
Sure. Just congratulations to our Downers Grove North-South Co-op gymnastics team, which we affectionately call the Trostangs, for their second place finish in state after finishing first in state last year. So just fell a little short this year, but still an awesome season. So congratulations to them and their parents and their coaches and everybody that's part of their lives. So thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mike. Danny?
No report. Thank you, Mayor.
Leslie?
I just want to thank UDG for the presentation and giving us some food for thought and, ways that we can possibly make this a more inclusive community. I also just want to toss out there that Passport to Dining will be happening again from the Grove Foundation in April, so stay tuned on our Facebook page for more information. That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Martin?
Mayor, there are 121 days left until Rotary Grove Fest.
Thank
How
you.
many?
Counting the minutes, 121 days.
Thank you.
You want? Nothing further, Mayor.
Chris?
I have no report, Mayor. Thank you.
Greg?
I really wanted to see Danny vote no on the White Castle thing. No, I wanted to say thank you to the Downers Grove Professional Firefighters Association for inviting us to their annual recognition dinner. Leslie and I were there, as well as Leslie's husband, Jason, and had a great time. It's always good to recognize the retirees for their service to our village, and just the outstanding folks there that serve us day in and day out and keep us all safe. So many thanks to them. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is the manager's report. We're going to get into some additional work on our comprehensive plan. We're going to do that in the committee room. And so, Dave, you have anything for the moment prior to that?
No, sir.
All right, we'll take about a 5-minute break. You're all welcome to join us. Next room over, we'll continue our conversation and comprehensive plan tonight. A bit more about our comprehensive plan and some of our efforts at community engagement, I think, is a plan tonight.
Yes, it is.
So Stan, you gotta
Thank
take it
you, Mayor
away.
Barnett. So I will start off by passing the torch off to Josh Coons, who's with Housley Levine and our lead consultant on the comprehensive plan and the related projects. So very excited to have him here tonight to start us off. Thank you so much, Mayor.
All right, thank you again all for having us. Good to see you all again. Like Stan said, my name is Josh. I'm with Housley Levine, and we're the lead consulting firm on the comprehensive plan. I'll just show you a slide with the rest of the team in just a second here. Tonight we've only got a 4-part agenda, but it should be pretty exciting and interesting. So we want to touch on our team, go through the engagement and communications process, and then spend some time with all of you in discussion and Q&A. And Maurice is going to lead most of this, but just to reorient you to the overall team, again, Housley Levine leading the charge on all of these projects, and we're working closely with Altogether and Marisa, who's going to be up here in just a minute, on engagement, and that's going to thread throughout all of the 4 projects. And again, we're working with Delta Institute on the environmental sustainability plan, Baxter and Woodman on the bike and pedestrian plan, and Hitchcock Design Group on the downtown streetscape and Fairview plan and Fairview focus area implementation plan. Tomorrow night we'll be out here, John from our team will be out here with Baxter Woodman to meet with the Transportation and Parking Commission. So lots of teams, lots of faces will be out here over the next 18 plus months. but one big cohesive team. And really, what really threads it all together is this consistent public engagement, messaging, and branding, and thematic through line that Maurice is going to start to take us into. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Marisa. I'll be back up here for a little bit, but most of this is going to be you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Hello all. I am Marisa with All Together. We're a place-based creative agency. So we work with communities around Chicagoland and the country with partners like Housel who are looking for creative, consistent, and sometimes out-of-the-box thinking around engagement. And also bringing the capacity, which is really important to implement that engagement. As you all know, as elected officials, that takes a lot of effort and thought. So we have been working with your amazing staff and our project team to start to craft a draft engagement plan, which I think you all have received. And we're going to talk about some of those elements here today and really want to reserve the bulk of this presentation for discussion with you all to help guide. It's still very much a draft plan. And the three main goals have emerged from these conversations with the team and your staff. And they're all centered around the themes of getting people involved so that they know what this project and all of these projects are, why it's important. Once we get them involved, keeping that momentum, keeping them involved, and then using this process to build consensus. So you'll see here that we've got these three. And the first is really building the momentum and excitement around the creation and the implementation of these projects. And you, with your staff, right, and very engaged public, you've done a lot of planning. And you've also had a lot of surveys. And so what we've heard is that there's a little bit of engagement burnout. So we're going to have to be really creative about the ways that we go out to the public to engage them and get their thoughts. And you also have kind of a range of ages and background in this community. So the way that we're thinking about engaging youth, which is anything from 24 younger, right, looks very different than the way that we may be engaging older residents and citizens. So we're going to need a diversity of tools and ways to get out so that people feel like they're a part of the process, which leads us to this last goal, which is ensuring people feel their voices are heard and that their voices are valued. And I'm going to get a little bit more into the strategy and our thinking behind that in just a moment. So these are all great goals, but it takes a lot of work, as I mentioned. So how are we going to do that? The first sounds simple, but it is a little bit harder to execute, and that is making it fun and convenient. So I am a working mom of 3 children, and one of my kids plays hockey. And I'm also a planner, so I understand the value of these meetings and participating in what planning means for a community. But it's very hard for me outside of work to attend a public meeting. It just is because of my schedule. And I am a planner, right? So that is an obstacle that we are always facing when we're trying to get a community involved around a comprehensive plan or these other sub-projects that are going on. And so what we do is we try to make it fun and convenient. We go to where people are. So in our engagement plan, we have a mix of some standalone workshops that are needed because we want the time and that face-to-face conversation that a workshop can accommodate for. But we also make sure that that's fun. We've got food, maybe bugles. Here's a thing here, right? Sometimes we have music where we feature local musicians. We have kids activities so that we're pulling families. And we have opportunities and stations so that people, if they're really interested in, say, the mobility plan, can participate and share their feedback. Okay. So that's something that's going to be really important. We make sure that we're going out to where people are and that they want to participate. The other thing is understanding what motivates people, which I think we're all probably very good at. I joke to my husband that I'm as a planner, I'm kind of an underpaid therapist, right? But there is some truth behind understanding the psychology of what gets people to participate and what motivates people. So our firm, we are all urban planners with marketing and creative backgrounds. So we have the ability to be able to take all of the input and analysis that Housel creates and needs to drive the process and translate it in a way that gets people's attention. Right? We humanize a lot of the work that we do, and we bring it to the forefront, understanding different target audiences and how we're going to get them involved. So what we have found is that this is going to be a consensus building process. And in order for people at the end of the day may not like everything that is in the plan or agree with everything. But if they feel like it was a fair process and that their voice was considered and there were opportunities to participate, they're much more likely to buy into the vision and the end goal and the end plan. And as elected officials and staff, it is our job to make sure that we're building that consensus and that we're really giving opportunities for people to participate and understand how their voices and their input is shaping each point of this process so it's more iterative. And then the question becomes, okay, you've got this plan and you've got an approach. How do we measure effective engagement? How do we make sure that we're hitting the mark? And the answer is, it's an art, not necessarily always a science. There are things we can measure, and we will. And we want to work with you all in this discussion to identify what those metrics are, right? Some of those are the total number of touch points. So how many surveys have been completed? How many unique website visitors are there? You know, how many pop-up workshop conversations do we have? Sometimes because we're so successful in reaching so many different people that it's how many postcards have we handed out. That's a touch point, right? And then we can compare that to some specific goals related to the percentage of the population and the demographic and how that tracks, right? We can also look at the mentions and engagement on social media sites, which we're finding is more and more important, on Facebook and groups and Nextdoor. But then there's also that kind of art, which I'm sure you all are familiar with. We want to check in with you on, you know, what are the messages and the emails and the tones that you're receiving around these projects and the different engagement opportunities, right? And that requires commitment on your part to engage in those conversations. But the thing that I want to mention and highlight here is that the hallmark to us of a successful engagement process is not something that is so set in stone that there's not enough flexibility to say, hey, we're not meeting this particular metric or goal that we outlined early on in the process. So let's recalibrate, let's pivot a little bit, let's think about how we're able to do that. And I think having that flexibility, so seeing our engagement plan as a guide, but knowing that these conversations are going to continue, and this is the first of many that I think that we'll have throughout the process, is going to be really important. And I look forward to collaborating with all of you and your staff to make sure that at the end of the day that this is very successful. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh briefly to just talk about the timeline and some of the elements that you will be seeing throughout our engagement process.
So, yeah, we've gone over this timeline with you all before, but one of the things that we sometimes try to convey at House of Levine is that any planning process really, you know, despite all these tasks and subtasks and even different plans here, is that really what planning has to do is really just three things. It first has to establish where we are today, the good, the bad, the ugly, the baseline of existing conditions, and then where do we want to go. That's where we're getting a little more visionary, aspirational. We're looking out 20 years, you know, into the future. What's Downers Grove 2045 going to look like? And then how are we going to get there? That's the policies, the recommendations, the actions, and the implementation of the planning process. So whether we're talking about the comprehensive plan, the streetscape plan, environmental sustainability plan, or the bike and pedestrian plan, all of them to a certain extent are going to do those three things. They're going to establish that baseline, they're going to have some sort of visionary or aspirational component, and then they're going to provide the direction to the village's decision makers. How are we going to get there? What are the things that we're going to do to move the needle? What can we actually do to, you know, reach this lofty and aspirational vision? And I like that as we're thinking about outreach, because really the three thrusts of outreach across all of these projects sort of fit into those three buckets. So when we're in the first third or so of the project and the process, about from January through into May, we're really focused on existing conditions, or I'm sorry, about January, looking here, January right through May and into June. the first thrust of the process is that existing conditions, that where do we want to go sort of phase, baseline of information. So we're asking the community, what are your issues? What are some of the opportunities? What are the things that are, get all your feelings about your community out and tell us just everything that you know about the community. That's what we're going to be doing in the community kickoff, and depending on how they get structured out, the first 3 pop-up events that Maurice is going to tell you a little bit more about. Then as we get more visionary, when we get into the visioning part of the planning process, we're going to be doing community-wide visioning workshops and another series of pop-up events, and that's when we're going to be asking people a little more like, okay, think long-term, think big picture, think aspirational, where do you want to go? And then when we get into that last third of outreach and the last third of these planning processes, we're going to be presenting stuff to people, asking them to react in an open house setting. What do you think of this that we've developed? What do you think of this deliverable? We're going to have things like posters. We're going to have people be able to weigh in in different ways what they think about certain things. So even though there's a lot of tasks, subtasks, and 4 different processes, really the thrusts of outreach are going to thread across all the documents in those 3 ways. Where are we today? Where do we want to go? And how are we going to get there? And I'll just take a quick second to talk about stakeholder interviews. One of the first things that we're doing in terms of outreach, and this is even going to start next week with a program of stakeholder interviews with some key stakeholders for the comprehensive plan. We're going to be asking people in one-on-one to maybe 1-on-3 small groups, sit down, tell us all that you know about the village and everything that you may know. A more informal conversation, usually confidential, so that we can get that unfiltered feedback that's sort of, like I said, good, the bad, the ugly, as we start to build our baseline of existing conditions. And all the different planning groups for each of these projects are doing this in some way, shape, or form in this first part of the process. So that's a little bit more of a different type of outreach. It's small scale, and it's not big and flashy like we're talking about some of these other events, but it's one way that we get some really good introductory information from the people who know the village best. So, back over to you, Brian.
Yeah, that sounds great.
There you go.
Okay, so paired with this first thrust will be a survey. And we're thinking about the questions and the structure of that. One of the admittedly complicated things about this project is just that there's the umbrella project, right? This guiding DG or Downers Grove, and then all of the projects that fall underneath that. And so what we want to do is balance 2 things with the survey. The first is that Josh and all of the other team members are getting the input that they need to help drive the process and create their plans. And the other is that we want to make the survey approachable. No one wants to take a 60-question survey. And especially in thinking about how do we have these quick hits with the public at pop-ups, we need to think about the way that it's designed so that it promotes people actually taking the survey. And so one thing that we're exploring is basically kind of a set of the most important questions that we want to get input from. And then if someone has additional time, that there is an optional track where then they can participate and share their thoughts. But more to come on that and structure, and looking forward to talking to you about that. But really through the survey, we want to get the community's thoughts on existing conditions, their vision, and then areas of concern. So that will be the framework for our survey. And we will publicly kick things off with a kickoff event. We're looking at early April right now. And our hope is that this would be a large-scale event that's very well promoted. We're going to finalize the date and give at least a month lead time to be able to do so. And we want it to be very festive, as I talked about before, with food and kids station and activities. And right now, what we found great success with, and projects like this that have a number of different sub-projects that are going on, is to have different stations around the group, right? And so that people can come in and they are incentivized through a passport or something where if they go to each station, they can get a stamp and they can win things like cool project swag. We just worked on a project in downtown Chicago where we did a pop-up And we had created these custom tote bags that kind of look like the project, but we're really fostering pride in Chicago, or in what would be Downers Grove, right? It's something that can live on. And we had people we had a line snaked like down State Street because people wanted a bag. And we had said, like, look, this is our custom edition, right? You have to participate, you have to take the survey or do some sort of activity to win this. So we're constantly thinking about what are the fun ways to incentivize participation. And so that will be the kickoff event. And that will be followed by pop-ups that I had mentioned. So thinking about very well-attended events that are already existing around the village and having a station or a tent there, pulling people in for quick hits. Usually we'll have some sort of tactile, interactive activity that they can do, and then also a prompt to take the survey. And depending on what the event is and if it lends itself, oftentimes we'll say, hey, if you do that quick survey, top 10 questions and show us, then you can win, or you can select some of the swag that we have. And it's very successful in driving people to take the survey and to give their inputs. And one thing that we really want to think about is the diversity of events and their target audiences, right? So that we are getting in front of as many people as possible, but also different communities throughout Downers Grove. And really looking forward to getting your thoughts on that, or where are the events that we really need to be. These will be occurring, kind of the first and second waves of pop-ups will be from May until around August. So those first 3 pop-ups that we'll have will really kind of align with Josh's, the first thrust of understanding those existing conditions. And then the next 3 will be really focused on the vision. And so we'll have activities that align with that, and are very excited to attend a lot of what sounds like awesome events throughout the summer. And so the last thing I want to quickly touch on is communications. I brought this up before, but to us it's very important the way that we're talking about these projects, each as kind of one umbrella brand. With the help of your creative staff, we've come up with Guiding DG, Planning the Future of Downers Grove. So you'll see that the logo here has kind of those, depending on how you interpret it, 4 arrows representing the 4 different projects that are coming together. Some others on staff had kind of seen people that were celebrating. I think that's what we want in a logo, right? People can see different things. But this is showing coming together as one community to determine the vision and the future. And then we've also created these sub-icons or brands, right, that feel like they live in the same family, but also give each of the team that are focusing on both the comprehensive plan, the mobility, the sustainability, and streetscapes, a color palette, an icon that they can kind of identify and use to drive their and brand their work. So that, this is incredibly important because as a community member, right, I may see, okay, this is something related to the sustainability plan, but I know that that is connected to Guiding DG. And that comes back to the consensus building. So if I am giving my input, right, on the sustainability plan, I know it's part of this bigger effort. And for you all and to staff, when you're thinking about the implementation, again, you can tie it back to this brand. And it's kind of a connecting the dots for community members in terms of what they're providing their input on and what that means in terms of implementation in the future. We'll have a project website that we're working on. This will kind of be the digital hub. So it will list all of the ways to participate and to engage, draft materials, contact information, more about each of the projects, and ways to get involved in each. And then on that website, we'll also kind of have an interactive mapping tool, which is really wonderful for those that want to participate more digitally, because it allows you to identify, map, and comment on geographic areas, to highlight valued community amenities and point out areas of concern. And oftentimes when you're thinking about the broader, like kind of geographic range of a comprehensive plan or a visioning project, I think it's really important sometimes to identify like input to specific places. And so this map allows you to be able to do that and engage in that way. Josh, was there anything else you want to mention on that social?
Really, I mean, different communities use this more than others, so I think I'd anticipate pretty good usage, especially across 4 different planning processes. This is already a pretty multi-purpose tool, but we'll work with staff and with the rest of the sub-consultant teams to make sure that the different icons and tools that we can add to map.social are relevant. If you're commenting on the streetscape plan and you're pointing out an area of concern, you should be able to point it out, whether you're kind of focused on streetscapes or bike peds stuff or sustainability. It should be pretty multi-purpose. Everything that people post on here is public right away. There is an account that you have to create to log in so you can return to your map. It's mobile friendly. You can come back and you can add to your map, and you can always view what everybody else is doing. So if you want to say, like, show me everybody's community assets, and see a map of just all the community assets, or a map of just all of the areas of concern or problematic intersections or whatever it may be, you can filter it that way. The public can do that. At the end of the project, this is essentially built out a GIS layer file, and we'll turn that back over to the village to use however you all want to.
That's a great tool. And finally, in terms of the communication wave, so each time that we are going out to the public and promoting opportunities to get involved, we will work with both staff and communication partners, right, who are those trusted resources throughout the community to help us spread the word. And we make it very easy to do that by creating a marketing packet that they can use to help spread the word and to share. And we try to make things highly visual, highly graphic, and engaging, and dehumanize a lot of the tough issues that we're going to be delving into in this process. It's the why are we doing this, why is it important, and putting faces to that messaging. This is a campaign that we did in Dane County, which is home to Madison, and we did this campaign, and in the first few days we received over 6,500 survey responses by creating something that I think was very engaging and on point in terms of messaging, and then also working through the communication partners to help spread the word. So that's something that is going to be a priority for all together in this effort, and looking forward to giving all of you, right, the messaging that you need to report out to your constituents. So with that, I'd like to spend the rest of our time really picking your brains and getting your thoughts around engagement. So I'd love to open it up to really the first question and hearing more about your engagement goals for guiding GG in general, and then each of these projects. And I'm just going to start taking notes.
Anybody want to start? Engagement goals. What are our engagement goals? Greg, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I think my principal goals are just making sure that we get as diverse a cross-section as possible. And I think the best ways to do that is to make sure that we're reaching out in as diverse a manner as possible. We can't control necessarily the volume of input that we're going to get, but we can control the different ways that we go out to people. And I like a lot of the different ideas in terms of digital marketing, in terms of going to different events. And what I want to make sure is that we go to as many events as possible, not just in downtown, but where people are gathering in other parts of the village. While downtown is that central gathering place, there's still going to be a number of folks who don't make their way down there for Rotary Grove Fest or for the farmers market or what have you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Are there any events outside of downtown that are top of mind that we should be looking into?
There's bound to be, I'm thinking about different church gatherings. EQDG holds events from time to time. There's car shows, that's a great one.
Like some private businesses, restaurants, our local breweries, things like that, when they have events as well.
I mean, we've got 2 school districts and a great Y, and I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think it depends on how much we can tap into that, which is one of my thoughts too.
Yeah, those are all great ideas.
Yeah, I mean, kind of along with that was my concern, is just making sure we're meeting people where they are. So obviously, I mean, most of the major village-related events we have are downtown. You know, and we have the library that puts on a lot of events, which sees a large cross-section of the community, which is a great resource. But it would be great to branch out a little bit from that. So whether it be the schools, places of worship, any sort of the community centers like the Y, even thinking about places like transitional housing or housing for seniors. I want to make sure that we don't miss out on those who maybe don't have as much mobility and can't get to these locations. You know, again, I also a working parent with a daughter in hockey.
You feel my pain.
Right, trying to do all the things, but realistically, like, I probably can work remotely and do something, but there are plenty of hourly or wage workers who can't. And so just making sure that we are getting out of the downtown and potentially not only meeting them where they are, but also, I know you mentioned a lot of things about, you know, kids' activities, but making sure that people feel like they can focus on this while not having to worry about, you know, a kid running around. And so that is something that always pops into my mind. I really want to consider a lot of our historically marginalized populations. You know, we are not 100% white, right? Or, you know, 100% non-LGBTQ. So I want to make sure we consider those populations who often have been left out of the conversations and find a way to try and connect people where they are with those. So EQDG is a great example for our LGBTQ plus community members. But, you know, even thinking about apartments and renters and all of that, I want to make sure that we kind of get that cross-section as well. Because when we think about a lot of these topics, for example, the sustainability plan, which is one that I was, you know, a big proponent of, environmental justice is a big part of that. So it's not just kind of, is the village doing a good job of sustainability, but is it equitable across the board? And so I want that to make sure that that is a part of our engagement goals, is not just, you know, overall village-wide, but let's make sure we're being equitable throughout the village. And so those were kind of some of the things that I was thinking about as we started to talk about this.
Yeah, I really appreciate those thoughts, and you know, I'm excited because that you all and your staff saw the value in the pop-ups, and so we are scoped to do more than a lot of our other communities that we work in. So I think that there's a real opportunity, because we have that and the sheer number of pop-ups we're able to do, to think about how they occur downtown, outside of downtown, and then it's not just pop-ups. You know, we have this survey, but we have done a lot of work of like dropping off hard copy surveys and working with senior centers and other community organizations, standing outside of churches or you know, dropping off surveys there and making sure that they have flyers and promotional materials. So while we can't be everywhere, that's where I think the communication partners with trusted organizations really comes into play. And our staff, like we have specific staffers who they focus on youth engagement, others on BIPOC engagement. So I think that we bring that expertise of, okay, how do we make sure that we're being equitable with the engagement of everything? That's your thoughts. Any other goals?
Martin?
Sure. I will answer your question, and in typical fashion, I'll ask you a bunch of questions.
All right.
Because I'm really focused on the mechanics of a lot of this.
Yeah.
I think the main objective is for this to be a two-way exercise. So we should be educating as much as we are being educated. Engagement is an opportunity not just to say, what do you think, but it's also to share information and provide context in a way. So I would hate to not use that opportunity to also communicate things that are very important for providing the context necessary to get a helpful answer. Because if you just ask an open-ended question without any context, the answer might not be useful to you. And that kind of goes to the ultimate question of what are we trying to accomplish here, and how do we back into that by asking the right questions. So surveys are always very interesting because there's a lot of different ways to do a survey. There's a lot of ways to do a survey right. There's a lot of ways to do surveys wrong. I'm sure you only do them right. But I just have a bunch of questions like, how comprehensive is the survey? Is it every single person in the community? Is it every registered voter? Is it is it a random sampling of residents? You know, how much of the input is going to be guided as opposed to open-ended? Because if I just ask you, hey, what do you think of Downers Grove? I'm going to get one answer. But if I ask you 5 questions on certain topics, I might get different answers. And then I'm sure you're going to get a mix of both open-ended and guided feedback. And how does all that get synthesized in a usable manner? Because you could ask one person a question about, well, what do you want to see at the corner of Fairview and such, and someone's going to say, well, I want more parking. Someone else is going to say, I want open space. Or I want green space. Well, those are inconsistent, potentially. So how those things get synthesized in a way that we can utilize them. How is this all reported? Because this is really super important data that we're obviously, the community's making a big investment in. So I know you've touched upon the fact that this is going to be something that we can continue to use going forward. I would like to maybe think about what kind of modern tools that we can use to query this data set to answer other questions. Not necessarily saying that you use Copilot on it or something like that, but there are tools out there right now that can allow us to use prompts to get all kinds of other benefits out of this data, because we're going to make this investment in all this information. Let's get it back to us in a fashion that is helpful not only for the comprehensive plan and all these other approaches, but for 2 years from now, for other issues, something that we can use as a resource. So I'll probably just stop there right now. Really, the ultimate outcome is that the 7 of us need to get, and staff need to get, sufficient information that we understand well enough to guide decision-making.
So your questions were around the structure and the framing of the survey, right? And then the posing of questions, like the balance of open-ended versus like actual specific options, and making sure that they are not too open-ended, and then using modern tools. Do you want to speak? Do you want to start on the first couple?
Yeah, I mean, the question about the survey, it's not a statistically balanced survey. We're not scoped to do that. That's a whole nother ball of wax that a dedicated firm would that's can be a whole project in and of itself.
Can you explain a little bit more? What would you consider statistically balanced versus not?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but that's important to understand, because it's also important to understand the limits of the information, because you don't want to say, yeah, I asked a question and 5 people said this is the answer. That's got to be what the community thinks.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's not. It's a data point.
Yeah, I can speak to that too, but a statistically valid survey, and I am getting a little bit out of my area of expertise here, but it's when there's a targeted percentage of the community and that number of people have to take the survey, and they can say that a statistically valid sample of the community, of the population, has taken the survey, and we can attest that these results represent the whole population.
And oftentimes, like a stipend for participation in companies filling out the survey.
Right.
And they have to also not be targeted.
Right.
That's an important part. If you say, I'm going to go to all the schools and ask a question, it's not, even if you get enough number, it's not a statistically valid survey yet.
And that can be quite an undertaking that is a separate effort.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not suggesting that we do that. I just think it's important to understand what the product of the work is and how to treat it. It's a data point as opposed to. I'll stop.
So we have a well-tested survey that we use and modify, to be community specific, and it's a mix of multiple choice and open-ended questions. It has some basic demographic questions that are optional. Sometimes we'll ask people, optionally where they live, and if enough people answer it, we can kind of show a distribution on a map where everybody participated in the community. And I guess participation, we've seen these really take off in some communities where thousands of people take the survey, and we've seen communities where there's less participation. We really view the survey, Map.social, and the online stuff as sort of one ingredient into the overall process. We're going to be asking similar, not the same questions, but similar questions across all the different feedback that we receive, so we can sort of compare results. And when we do community outreach events, we do summaries of those events. The survey data that we typically collect is, we can download that, and it depends what tool we use, but we can download it and export it and make that whole database searchable and available. So it is, we kind of try to have an open book on, here's the responses that we got. As far as, your example of one person saying they wanted a park and one person saying they want a parking lot at the same corner, public feedback and community input is, again, one ingredient into the planning process. So it has to be tested against best practices, against staff and decision maker input. So, even if 5 people said they wanted to see parking, I don't think that necessarily means that that's what's the highest and best use of that particular location. So, we would view all these engagement things as one pieces of the process.
Yeah, and the survey is an important one, but as you mentioned, is just one piece of that. There are going to be people who will not take the survey. And so that's where having these other activities, we just did a prioritization exercise in a project in Florida, right? And it was, as people were walking through, they were able to place dots.
Mhm.
Not just as important information,
It's a
right?
data point.
Feedback from that is one data point that we would have gotten from a similar survey question. So we think about that as we're structuring the different activities, and we're compiling all of that, and also in a digestible way to report back to y'all, this is what we're hearing across all of the different channels and activities.
So basically, then it comes back to us in a format where it's an assemblage of data points that are not being synthesized. You're not providing themes or anything like that. You might be plugging them into different things that were associated with the survey, but basically, it's like, here's kind of what we heard. Now, you draw your conclusions from it.
Yes. And oftentimes we will find themes, right, that are emerging, but again, and we will summarize those
Sometimes
and present
surprises.
back, right? Sometimes surprises, but I think those are important. So we'll do some of the work for you in terms of like, overall, here's what we heard, but always that is backed up by the data that we've received from all these various different touch points.
Thank you.
Yeah, great questions.
As we're kind of picking up on that a little bit and pulling that thread further in the two-way exercise, as we're out and about soliciting this information, survey, obviously, people know what a survey is if there's this prioritization exercise. But is it safe to assume that the scope of questions or scope of topics presented or given for people to review is effectively constrained by the scope of our comprehensive plan? What I'm getting at is, if you had just to take it to the one extreme, if you just open up and say, what do you like best about Downers Grove? There's a really good chance you're going to hear a huge number of people who will tell you something that has nothing to do with village government.
Sure.
What do you do with that data, right? So are we, as we're asking for this input, are we also telling them what it is we're asking for and what the point of this is and what the scope of this effort is?
Yeah, I guess Marisa can weigh in on this too, but when you're in a little more constrained environment like a survey or map.social or something like that, it's pretty clear, especially when you go multiple choice, then is there anything else you want to say about housing? It might be the open-ended, sort of more open-ended question. In outreach in person, when people have the chance to raise their hand and talk about something, one of the examples that often gets brought up is schools, quality of schools, and that's something that comes up in pretty much every community. It's obviously, why people choose to buy their home in a community, and the quality of schools, no doubt about it, influences how people, choose where they want to live, what town they want to live in, what part of that town they want to live in, if there's multiple districts. But the village has limited influence on the school district as a partner organization. So crime comes up, in these workshops. People want to talk about their specific issues. I think directing it back to what what the village can address directly, what the village has to address as a partner, what's an issue that's pretty far outside the realm of the comprehensive plan. We can do that in the workshop setting, but we also try let people speak their mind and get things off their issues are all valid when we're doing our workshop exercises. We want to hear them all. So.
And there, most of the time, none of this exists in like the vacuum of, here's a survey, right? There's some sort of context, and that's where these marketing materials are really important. Whether that's, they're printed, and if we're dropping off hard copy surveys, there's a flyer or a poster that talks about what this process is and what we're hoping to get from that input. It's why, when we send out the links to the survey to communication partners, it comes back to the website, which has a much more kind of comprehensive what this process is all about. So the other thing, we have found a lot of success in kind of informational like videos, short clips that can be sent out as well, and something that we could explore as part of kind of the marketing and communications. You saw in the Madison project that a lot of that had to do with the affordability crisis. And I think there was a lot of kind of level setting that needed to happen and education around what that crisis means to be able to promote engagement and input. So that is another effective means that we found to help create a two-way exercise where we are very much educating around these core issues as well.
Yeah, so I kind of play off what Commissioner Tully said a little bit. I've written down success should be measured by gathering enough information for us, to make decisions. And so with that in mind, understanding that it is an art and science, which is something I know a little bit about because that's what architecture is and that's what I do. But it'll be up to us, I think, to decide when we have enough information, right? And I'm not sure how we're going to know that. I think that's where a little bit of the art comes in, right? But I suspect that there's going to be a process to, in places where we feel like there are holes, where we don't have quite enough information. What's the process like to then dive deeper and get that additional information that we need?
I think that's a great question, and that goes back to when I said this has to be more of a flexible plan. And I have some previous experience in terms of other communities, and that's saying that we're not getting enough response rate from the Latinx community, right? We've set some targets. We don't feel like the responses that we've gotten represent the demographic of the community enough. And so that's when we're saying, okay, then we have to do more pop-ups at churches, or working with different community organizations that really targets that community. So it depends on, that's why we set up these kind of early metrics of this is kind of where, we're gonna gauge success. But I think some of that is the art. It's what are you hearing, right? And how can we address what you're hearing through additional or enhanced engagement efforts?
I just want a follow-up statement that success will not mean that a majority of the 50,000 residents of Downers Grove are as engaged as we'd like them to be. In fact, there's a very good chance that it'll be substantially less than the majority. So, there'll still be people coming to us and they'll say, I didn't hear anything about this, and I think we need to be prepared for that and not let that take us into a place of, well, maybe we need to do more, right? So it's just caution. I've lived through this a little bit with my experience in District 99 and everything we did for our master facility planning there, and a very similar process and a very successful process. So I know that this can be very successful. But it's important that we understand what success is, right? And so.
No, I think, and that's an awesome segue to kind of this third question here. As council, how can we set you up for success? So I've heard, right, providing all of the data and the synopsis. And I also think that, to your point, there are going to be people that are saying, hey, I didn't know about this, right? This wasn't a fair process. And so for us to make sure that we're doing as comprehensive an engagement as outreach as we can and documenting that. And not just by the stats and the numbers, but by pictures and videography. Things that you can point to saying, no, here's everything that we went out and did. There were opportunities to get involved. And that feels like what I'm hearing is a really important piece of this to equip you all with.
It's a long process too, right? So even after we've done our information gathering initially this spring, this summer, it doesn't mean that there isn't still time for people to continue to offer, no matter when they finally do get engaged. I mean, there's a big north-south football game in the fall.
Yeah.
You know, we've got several thousand people in one place, right? And things like that for continuing opportunities to engage.
And right now, we've talked about the arc of engagement in this process, but we're really focused on kind of this first wave and push. But there are, I mean, the beauty of this is that we do have pop-ups and engagement that is scoped throughout. So there will be opportunities in the fall, in the winter, at each step, so that it's more of an iterative process to say, hey, you haven't been involved, but there's a great opportunity, right, at this football game, or take this survey. So.
I don't think we ought to get too hung up on defining success. Success is we care enough to hire somebody that's a professional with a lot of experience doing this elsewhere, and then executing on a plan. We can't control what the outcome of that is. And so if we've taken the time and the effort to say this is important enough to get some professional help doing it, with people who have experience doing it, then we put out a plan and we actually execute on the whole plan, including some sale adjustment along the way, but we actually do that, then when we get to the end of this thing, we will have succeeded in doing this, irrespective of how many we get and what particular subject they're on.
Well, yeah, right. I think it's worth emphasizing there, because this isn't like we have to get to a plus or minus 5%.
Yeah.
Because there's no line here we have to reach.
Right.
The goal is to get information, the goal is to educate, the goal is to engage, and then we all felt like we had a pretty good engagement process. It's not going to be perfect. It never is. It can't be. But then we were able to then factor that into the existing information that we have. Let's not forget about that. We have an awful lot of existing information. That is, we can synthesize all that and then move forward with a plan and then execute on it successfully. That's what success is. There's no benchmark here. There's no you have to reach a certain quartile in order for this to be a successful project. That's not the way this works.
I mean, I think ideally for me, when we get to the end of this, I don't want to feel like we're kind of hearing from the same folks that they kind of felt left behind. In my view, that does mean that we maybe fell short a little bit, right? We're always going to get, some folks who are going to say, I didn't realize it was going to happen. But if we're seeing a pattern that it is all a similar demographic, whether it be working parents or hourly wage or renters or seniors or those with disabilities, if it feels like a lot of our criticisms are coming from kind of a similar population, then I would be concerned. But as long as we're kind of getting, the random folks popping up from different demographics saying they weren't aware, that will feel a little bit more like success, because it'll mean we didn't miss some big part of the population, but rather, there are just some folks who maybe in this, 6 months of time weren't quite out there and available to participate.
Well, even if that happens, though, we're hiring all together.
Exactly.
Who has a lot of experience doing this,
Yep.
particularly reaching out to broad cross-sections. And we talked about part of the plan is going to be some sale adjustment along the way.
Yep.
Right? So if we do in those two things, even if the net result is we hear from the same 150 people that we hear from all the time, that will still have been a successful process. You can't make somebody participate. There's not anybody holding back on trying to reach out. Chris?
Yeah, so I see it a little differently, but I've got a couple points I want to make too.
Down here.
Yeah. Right,
This is
small.
great.
Right,
It's
small.
going forward.
And I have a bunch of questions, but it's a little tricky to figure out where they're going to come in, so I won't pile them all right now. But
Okay,
sticking,
and I want to note that I will hand out
Yeah.
the card, like we can continue these conversations and happy to
Sure.
address any that you may have.
Yeah. So sticking with the survey, because that seems to be where we're focused. I don't agree that it's a matter of just let what happens happen and then evaluate what we get. I think, yes, altogether and the team are the professionals. We certainly want to look to your expertise. However, I would expect your expertise to have some sort of thresholds to say we have met a minimum of engagement that is going to be informing our plan in a way that's useful, because I think I think we do need to be cognizant. I would sort of I agree with what you said, Leslie, about not hearing from the same people that they didn't hear about this. Turning that the other way is we may also hear from the same 150 people that we always hear from. And I don't think that's always a great data set. Folks who are highly engaged are very important, and we welcome that. But we are making decisions for all the folks in town. So I think what I am very curious about is we've got some strategies on how we can get folks out that are typically respondents. How do we look for ways to try to drive those that may not? And all the pop-up events and all that, I understand that. So that's one thing. I would like to have a better understanding of maybe what you've done in the past, and it doesn't have to be tonight, certainly follow-up. But okay, because we do need an objective. It's not just, in my view, it's not just whatever we get. Because I think this crew and the stakeholders and whoever else we have trying to promote this, how are we going to measure our success if we don't have and I'm sort of a numbers guy, have a number to look to. I understand that it's one data point in a bunch of different things that go in. This is, to me, an important one. This is sort of the crux of the community feedback. I know we're going to have some stakeholder interviews. We're going to have some community events. This, to me, is very important. So important that I would also wonder, because we are, and Commissioner Tully pointed out, we are investing in this. And I'm more interested in seeing surveying beyond this exercise, right? I feel like this is a great exercise to start our surveying, but as a community, once we're done 2 years from now, I am very interested, have been interested in seeing more surveying being done. So in my mind, whatever platform we choose, that should be a platform that our team can take moving forward.
Okay.
And then we have the data from this survey, and then we're able to, if we want to do another survey, it's all in one place. If we're relying on you to provide that information as a download, and then we're sitting in Excel trying to do the next survey and figuring out what platform. To me, I think that's, and I think the same, we can talk about this too, but I think the same goes for Map Social. It sounded like you can provide an overlay. I would be far more interested and open to the council for feedback for us to have admin access to that, so that when this initiative is over, we can think of dozens of ways to leverage that as it pertains to specific areas or specific projects, and maybe even just the general. So to me, and again, I am also in line with the mayor in his thought that we need to make sure this survey stays focused on what we're doing, because it is very easy for it to be, what do you like about Downers? What's wrong with that? those kinds of things. We're going to get that anyway. So I'm not suggesting that we do now try to figure out all the things we want to survey. It has to be pinpointed to this comprehensive plan and the 3 others. But I really do feel like there's got to be some benchmarking and expectation to know when we're 2 months in to say we're not getting what we thought.
When we have to pivot, right, or recalibrate.
Yeah,
right?
like what are we basing that pivot on? That, I guess that's what's the basis of the pivot?
So I think it's a yes and, right, hearing both. That we will have numbers and ranges, right, target. And part of that is what has, kind of those appropriate ranges in other similar communities. And the other is you have done some survey work. So what has the response rate been in those previous surveys? What are the demographics? We're working with staff on that. So the next step is for us to create these metrics, some of which include the numbers and ranges, not only for the survey, but I think also there's a lot of that, okay, how many touch points do we want to get in certain communities? That might be the survey, that might be postcards that are handed out, that might be interactions with some of our activities that we have. It'll be more comprehensive, but it will provide a guiding document for us to check. And I'm not saying that we're going to hit all of these, but we're going to know if we're close or outside of these ranges, and have another conversation of, as a group, how do we recalibrate a bit to get there if we're not meeting those ranges? So we'll have both.
And I would also add, which is a point I've made before, So coming from a digital marketer, the idea of this is it's very digital. And we have, I know, a community, part of our community that is simply not as engaged in that way. And I worry that if our communication is all email or social, which has its own challenges as it pertains to reach and that type of thing, that we're not getting the message out to enough. I particularly like the idea of oversampling, but it doesn't sound like we're getting into the statistical type of surveying. So, but I guess I would also be interested to understand outside. It's direct mail. It's mail. That's you know, and I know that can be expensive, but it does reach a lot of folks that are not as online.
Remember, it's an election year, so there's going to be a lot of mail go to the garbage. It's bad timing for surveys.
I fully understand. Yeah, yeah.
You guys still,
Yep.
Do you still send physical water reminders?
Yeah, we do.
Is, success putting
Isn't this still being, this whole thing, we say this thing, as though it's a thing that's fully defined in this moment? That's really not the case, right? I mean, there isn't a thing yet. There's a beginning of a plan. One of the things we were talking about here tonight was what other input do we have on where we might do non-digital things, for instance. This is a evolving plan
Yeah.
that is
Yes.
going to continue to evolve, and we talked early on that there's going to be those pivot points.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is great.
I'm
feedback
sorry,
and
ma'am,
insight,
excuse me.
though.
So is there I'm not sure what that means.
Marissa, if I've got this wrong, jump in and kick me or something. But altogether has exactly the kind of metrics you're interested in. What's typical? What's normal? What's expected? What's not so great? And we're going to develop a plan. They are going to develop a plan that's probably extensive, and it points along the way. If it feels like, based on their knowledge and their experience and comparative data, that we're not getting the kind of involvement we like, there'll be adjustments to it. We'll make adjustments. That's, I mean, that's a pretty key component of what tonight's discussion is. There isn't a thing on the table that's thumbs up or thumbs down by any stretch.
This project isn't a survey, the project is the comprehensive plan. We shouldn't get caught up in
Well, the
the
project
survey.
we're discussing tonight is the way we're engaging to get the information out.
Right.
And to me, it's far more important, since this is the time we have to discuss it, to get out what, rather than say, well, they've got the plan and then let's wait them. Like my understanding was we were trying to bring what we think about the plan. And
yeah, the undefined plan.
Yeah, and I think each of your area of
Okay,
expertise, right? The fact that you have a digital marketing background, that, you know, there is a heavy emphasis to reach young families and youth digitally, but there's also, you know, an elderly senior population that we need to get in front of, and that might not be digital. And so we do have, I think, a healthy balance of what is the direct mail. We've done a lot of in water bills or park district guides, right? And able to get the word out, and then make it, if they're not going to still go online to take a survey, we have key locations where they can go and pick up a hard copy survey if we do not have the budget to do a direct mailer of the actual survey. So we try to make it as easy as possible for people to either be able to access a digital survey, or to have key defined locations where they can take the survey and drop it back off.
Yeah, I just want to get caught up in a lot of statistical survey stuff, because that's not what we're doing. But I think we're going to know whether we had good engagement with this process. And we have good benchmarks we can compare it to. We had 2 school districts that just did this. We have a park district that's doing it right now. I think we can look at what did you see as good engagement? Oh, we thought we had good engagement on the comprehensive plan that we just did the park district. Okay, well, what did that look like? Okay, then we can do what we think. But I think we're going to know whether we feel like we've gotten good information, because it's really not about a survey. It's about getting good engagement with the community, getting good feedback, in the sense that we heard enough in order to make good decisions. And I think, to the mayor's point, we're going to get to a point where if we think, you know, we're getting lousy feedback, then we're going to do something to get better feedback. But first thing was, it's not a statistical survey. So right off the bat, we have to focus more on the engagement that allows us to make good decisions. as opposed to if I was trying to make this admissible in court. We're not, that's what I'm getting at. We shouldn't get caught up on admissibility standards.
I wasn't. I'm just trying to understand how we best get this out to the most people, which sounds like that was the objective of a number of our commissioners, so.
And a mix of digital and kind of in printed, I think collateral is the best way to do that.
Yeah.
There were two things that Commissioner Gilmartin mentioned that I wanted to highlight, and I didn't want it to get lost in the everything here. One was I'm kind of excited about the idea of this being a tool that we can use in the future, right? This and we keep that in mind as we're moving forward for this. And the other was the reference to past comprehensive plans. And we brought that up before too, that we make that we're looking at the comprehensive plans that we've done before to maybe help, that might help guide some of the questions that get asked in the survey and follow-ups of things that we've done before. Some of those things that were important are still going to be important, and so we can build on that, right? And so I wanted to make sure that didn't get lost either, because I thought that was an important point.
And I would even add, as part of, I love the two-way exercise, Commissioner Tully. That was exactly what I was trying to think of the way to say it, and that's exactly right. I would love to see our past comprehensive plans and what we've demonstrated that we've already done. And so when people talk about the transformation of downtown, right, part of that comes from the guidance and how we use these plans to, like, for folks to see it in action. Because I think when folks think about a comprehensive plan, or it's a visionary document, sometimes I don't think there's a connection to it actually, what it can actually produce. And so I think a tie back to some of the great work that's been done in the past and how that has shaped our town to date, to say, this is what we're trying to do next. This is the next thing that we can glean from this plan.
That's a really good point, because it also is a way to motivate people to speak up and get involved. You can say, this prior one was based on input. Here's your chance to have input in the next one.
Right.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I love that.
We'd have some
That'll
little
be a big
narrative.
part of the resources that we create, and I think the messaging too, which is what we're working on. The why, the elevator pitch of why this is important.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Danny, do you? Okay, I don't want to. I just want to make sure I'm clear. The guiding DG phrase. That's sort of that's the campaign that's outward facing.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And it's basically like the umbrella brand, right, for all of these initiatives.
Yeah, I like it. I think, I don't know. Are we giving that feedback now?
Yeah.
I feel like.
Why not? Go for it.
Absolutely.
I've got the mic, I guess. I think so I love the idea. I'm very familiar with the concept of sort of, we've got 4 different components. We have to tie them together somehow, but also give them the ability to recognize them individually. Guiding DG is a little underwhelming to me. Doesn't feel like a transformation to me, but I feel like there's so much that we're looking to achieve. It's to me, it's a little beyond just guiding. That's my 2 cents on that. Talked about the survey stuff already. Talked about the engagements. I think the stakeholder interviews. I'm very interested to understand who and how those are, who they are, and again, I don't have to know now, but I would like some follow-up. I understand from this standpoint, property owners versus residents. Yeah, again, I'm a little worried of overrepresentation of a vocal group, so I want to maybe understand a little bit more about who those stakeholders would be.
I mean, I can speak to that maybe briefly. I guess this is one place where we want to talk to the most vocal person, or the person who has the most to say, or the developer who's doing the most work in the village. Somebody, I guess the big picture, you want to do a stakeholder interview or a small focus group with the person you want to talk to, more in depth than you could get from a survey or from a big outreach event. So I think we're doing, I want to say up to 16 of these for the comprehensive plan. I think the bike ped and the streetscape plan, maybe it says it up there.
There's about 8 or 9 with
Yeah.
each of those plans. Environmental, similar numbers.
Yeah, so we'll talk to a lot of people in these settings. One of the first ones that you lined up, Stan, was the two heads of the school districts, the two superintendents.
Yeah.
We'll have them in the room to talk, about their plans for their districts and things like that. So they're definitely more on the qualitative side, as a conversation.
I want to go back to the guiding DG because we've had a lot of conversations and workshopping with staff. And I think that that it's hard in one word or 2 words to capture everything that this project is. And we felt like guiding was proactive and somewhat inspirational, but not taking it too far. And I think like everything else, it will not live alone in a vacuum, this brand. There will be messaging, right, on the website and in the flyers and in the promotional materials that I think expands our ability to talk about what this is and inspire participation. And so after a lot of thought and back and forth, we landed on guiding DG, thinking about all the different target audiences, that was the one that would align the best.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Speaking of messaging, the other thing that I thought of is in terms of engagement is I think there's sort of a broad messaging around the comprehensive plan, the bike and ped plan, those types of things. I wonder if it makes sense to also look for more neighborhood or regional messaging. So I'll just give kind of an obvious example. What's going on with 75th and Lamont, right? There's a group of our residents down there who might be very, very interested in some of the changes there. They may not be as interested in what's happening downtown or on the north side of town. And I think because the comprehensive plan does touch very specific areas, I would like to see, as we message, that we can, I'm sure, provide you with a list of sort of areas of interest and focus, that messaging gets out in a way that people can, they may have an interest in that area and maybe not, where the bike path is going to go across North Downers. But that would be a way, I think, to help increase engagement, is think about some of those. And we've got commissioners and the mayor who've been around a long time and I think can provide a lot of insight into what over the years have been areas that keep coming up that we should, trying to hone in on. Not to influence the survey results, just to influence people to say, oh, I have maybe a voice in this. This is what I want fixed, or this is what, and that we are highlighting, if we can, those areas.
I think that's a great point, and that's the struggle with comprehensive plans, right? That right are a little bit more broader. I think that's where Not Social digitally is great, because as I had talked about how it ties back input to specific geographic locations and places, which we find fosters more input. But definitely the messaging around these projects, especially one that is balancing broader comprehensive plan with some of these, with Fairview and others, I think that it's going to be a balance of the big and the visionary with very specific areas and neighborhoods that we'll want to reference. So I look forward to working with you all on that as well. That's a big part of, I think, the communications and messaging around the engagement.
I think we should come back to the guiding DG, kind of maybe take the temperature of everybody here. And I'll just say, sometimes, so this might be just a matter of how it hits you. Right?
Yeah.
Just does it get me excited or not? I find it really compelling.
I'm so sorry, I don't know why I keep,
That's
I
okay.
think it kind of hits the spot.
I'm not the tech person, clearly.
Sorry, go ahead.
So I think it kind of hits the spot in terms of not being too aspirational. You could have said, future,
Yeah.
Downers Grove 2045, like you said, it could have been something like that.
Yeah.
I like the idea of guiding because it's all of us together trying to find our way, right? What's best for all of us. So kind of take me by the hand, sort of thing. And then I like
Yeah.
the graphics too. So kind of, well, we've lost the graphic, but at the top of the guiding DG, the sort of stuff. It looks kind of tree-like, looks kind of sun-like, looks kind of like people being together. It looks kind it's. And you've got all the 4 colors in it to correspond what's going on below with the other four things. And I think all in all, I think it's elegant in its simplicity. So there's no doubt about what this process is about. I think it conveyed that right, that message.
Thank you. And kudos to staff. We have thrown out some different ideas around. There's only so many ways you can slice it, right?
Yeah.
And there's creative words that have been done throughout the region and the country, and your staff are the ones that came up with guiding DG.
I really am interested in hearing what my fellow commissioners think about this because Chris has offered an opinion and now I have as well. So I think they need to know if we're in agreement on this because it's a pretty big deal, right?
Well, I'll jump in. I'm fine with guiding, and I don't want to undervalue that portion of it. The reason I'm fine with this is because I think it adequately and accurately reflects what this is, right? Which this is not, tell us what you want to change next year and expect to see it. That's not what this is. And so, it's a little bit, is it less than inspirational? Well, it doesn't drive you to the sale tomorrow. No, that's true. But this is, the comprehensive plan is, in fact, a long-reaching, slow-moving thing. And it is really about guidance, right? If you think about how our comprehensive plan, I love that idea of giving an example, a little narrative on the last comprehensive plan, how it was developed and how we saw it actually cause things to happen or not happen over the last 6 years. Because that's going to be an important piece of the message for folks to understand as they're responding to things and giving us their input, that this isn't, we'll take whatever input they give us.
Matters.
But every input matters, but it isn't, I wish there was a stop sign at this intersection, and that's why we're having this whole exercise. So it's, I think, to answer your question, Mike, I think guiding is good because, not so much because I love the graphics, but to me it reflects what I think this process is.
Yeah.
Fine by me. I'm not volunteering to design something different.
I think that would be unprecedented.
You don't know Martin?
You don't know me.
Just wait, we get a 1 a.m. email.
For the process.
Any other thoughts or questions for us?
No.
Okay. This
Okay.
was very helpful discussion. I appreciate all of your thoughts. And we are going to go back and put some of these thresholds of success, some metrics in there, and guiding principles for the engagement, and we'll share back with you all to get your thoughts. And Josh, do you want to talk about just quickly next steps?
Yeah. So we're working on the website, map.social, and the survey. We should have that in the hands of staff to review by the end of the month and ready to go live and start being shared in March. which is a good lead up to the kickoff event, which I think we're looking at early April. I don't know if that date has been finalized yet, but we have some tentative dates in the first week of April when we could do the big community-wide kickoff. And then, like Marisa talked about, we'll start looking at what those first few visioning kickoff pop-ups, will be scheduled to coincide with events that are happening around the village. We're already starting our boards and commissions initiation meetings. There's one tomorrow night with the TAP. John Houseel and Michaela from our office will be out here with Baxter Woodman. The bike for the bike ped plan with the Transportation and Parking Commission. We have the 28th. We're going to be doing kind of a day of outreach. We're going to do a business community workshop. We're going to do some key stakeholder interviews. We're going to do a staff tour, along the same lines that I keep saying this, the good, the bad, the ugly. Show us all those spots in the village that House of Levine needs to see to get going on this. If we have a little time, we'll start to do a little of our own self-guided field reconnaissance, a couple of those key stakeholder interviews, and then we'll be doing the Plan Commission and HP DRB kickoff for the streetscapes and the comp plan on February 28th. And then I think we have a tentative date in the very beginning of March 6th with the ECC to kick off that process with Delta Institute. We're already starting to gather information and outline the existing conditions report. So we're already working on that first deliverable that coincides with that first third sort of thrust of the project for the comp plan and the other remaining projects. So there's a lot going on, but so far I think we're working in lockstep with all of you, and it's a lot to do, but we're excited to be kind of in the thick of it already. So it's good to be here with you all, and let you close it out.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry you didn't get any engagement from us.
Yeah, I mean,
We're a little too quiet.
Mayor, I
yeah,
just
I wish
had,
we had 3 boards filled up.
no surprise, one more thing. The board and commissions that you mentioned was something that just triggered something that I thought of when you were talking. One of the steps or one of the initiatives is to sort of lean on us to make sure we're pushing out this stuff. You're going to provide us with kits and all that. Is there any reason we can't lean on our boards and commissions to do the same, members to do the same? We're engaging them through the process, using them. I view this, and correct me if I'm wrong. What's the ask in the plan that the preliminary plan was for us to make sure it depends on us to get the word out, right? You're looking to us to do that. We have how many boards and commissions, members of the community that are involved, that some are actually going to be key to this process. Is there any reason we can't engage them as well and provide them the same type of kits and things and encouragement to
I don't see
promote the same?
any issues. We've done that successfully in other communities.
Okay.
And we'll be looking to you all as, you are the ambassadors, right, to the community, but we'll also be working with staff, their communication channels, and a whole bunch of communication partners. So it's one piece of it, but I think a very important connection to the community. So the more of those partners we can get on board, the better.
I mean, it's just your report. 60, 70 residents that are tapped into this that all have Facebook, all have Nextdoor. If engagement's the objective, it feels like they're a good group to leverage. I don't know.
Well, just as an editorial comment, we need those boards and commissions to be plugged in.
Sure.
And some of them have not always been, even when now we're trying to get more and more engagement out of them. I'm not going to name any particular boards, but one of them's on the screen right now. So if there's board and commission members listening, please plug in on this.
Well, one thing I'll say to that note, you all did the 4-question exercise with Nick and Oscar a while back, a couple weeks ago. I think, having seen that exercise, it's fun, it's interesting, it's very simple, and we still get a lot out of it, a lot of discussion. I think anytime anyone sees that exercise once, they could go do it with their, their neighborhood group, their church group, whoever it may be. And that's exactly what the DIY kits give you instructions on how to do. Nick might have said this, that after seeing that workshop, you could all go ahead and do one. We'll say the same things to the boards and commissions. We're doing the same 4-question exercise. And the DIY kits, anyone in the community can request one and go conduct one. So we definitely encourage wide use of them. So having seen the exercise once, we'll task them with it.
Yeah.
We can task them with it a little bit if they want to. They can do it for sure. Thank you.
Okay, we normally, at this point in our meetings, take some additional commentary from our audience. We're happy to do that. I'll remind everybody, hopefully we're all following here, and this is a product that's still being developed, a process that's still underway. People representing the community sitting around this table have talked about all those things you see on the board, and additional volume, additional comments and voices for non-digital and for neighborhood-related stuff and for geographic-based stuff. And so if there's something that you think we're not thinking of or something that you think is a problem that hasn't been brought up, we'd love to hear about it. Please.
Yes. How are you dealing with survey bias on how you word the questions?
Josh, do you want to speak?
That's a good question. I mean, we might have to consider that one altogether. We have a series of questions that we've used. Not to say this is a boilerplate that Downers Grove is going to fit perfectly into. We tailor those questions to every community, but we've used these in or a variation on our survey. Probably 90% of the 250 plus comprehensive plans we've done in 30 states, and that doesn't mean it's perfect. We're going to review it with staff and it's all together and make sure that it's right for Downers Grove.
In the middle, please, go ahead.
So, just a couple thoughts, and thank you for all. Enjoyed your presentation, so thank you very much. I'm here because I am very interested in participating and being engaged in some of these areas. But one of the things that I really want to anchor on is that education piece, because I think as much as we say that there's a lot of information that's out there, I guarantee you when I talk to my neighbors and people in my cohort, we don't know anything about the comprehensive plan. I think there is a lot of pull, meaning that we have to be active to go after that versus push of information. I don't feel a good push of information. So I think the education piece is definitely important before we start going collecting the data. All right, I was in analytics for 23 years, so statistically significant. I think we could get there, right? We have what, 50,000 residents, Downers Grove? Plus or minus?
Yeah.
Plus or minus 50,000? That's 1,000 person response rate. I think we can get to 1,000, just my guess. We would have to do a little bit more on the demographics and make sure that everybody's evened out. But I think that seems achievable, right? But I like the approach to the education. I would very much like to be involved in any way, especially when it comes to a focus group. My previous professional opinion, I think the focus group size is a little small. I think we could go a little bit bigger on the focus groups to help narrow down what goes on that survey. And I appreciate Rebecca's question around bias, because it does seem like this is more all about marketing to get people to go along with the comprehensive plan versus getting possibly like the true opinions of, that's just the way I feel. This could be wrong, but just hearing, some of the things that you said in the beginning, which is more like, here's the plan, here's how we want to get people to come along with it, which I can appreciate, but I think people are going to definitely have some opinions. And Martin, I can definitely understand one person says yes, the other person says no, I get it. You know, it's totally, you're going to get two different answers every time, and you're not going to make everybody happy, so I understand that. But thank you for that, but I think the education piece, please, is so important, because I guarantee you a very large percentage of Downers Grove residents, I mean, you see the small sample size you have here, and that's because somebody emailed the village and sent it out to the neighborhood group, and that's why we're here, so. Right. So, yeah, and so I think it's, you know, it does take a lot, and like you said, we're all busy, right? We all have kids, we all have people, we all have 8 million things going on in a day, so it's really important that the village is proactive. I mean, I lead a team, it's my job to manage the communications for my team at work. And if they're not hearing it and they're not getting it, I have to ask myself, what am I doing wrong that I am not communicating that with them? And that's your all job here, right? Is like, if the village is not hearing it, or our residents aren't hearing it, it's your job to make sure that we are hearing it. And if a large percentage of our members aren't hearing it, that's our job to make sure they are.
Yeah, no, I very much appreciate that. And I think that you mentioned something about, like, you know, getting people saying this is the plan, right? But I think when we think about the marketing and communications push, it's more of a, this is why it matters, help us shape the input of what this plan is.
Yes, that's a better approach.
Yeah, very much so. And I think that's what drives our work, is that people are shaping what this plan is.
Go ahead.
I think the biggest stumbling block we've got to get over is apathy in town. I think it's rampant. It's not just our town, it's any town. You know, but we see that no matter you try to get people interested in something, unless you're digging a hole in their front yard. That doesn't bother me, I don't know. But that's a real hard one to get over. And what I hear a lot in town is that it's a waste of time. They don't listen to us anyway, or the decision's already been made before they even present them. I hear that a lot, and unfortunately, that allows people to believe that. And so, I try to encourage them to, get involved. It's our town, and but that's going to be a hard one. But I think main goals, is it inform, educate, and discuss. If we can get that far with the person, with people. And I think towns, not just us, towns in general, have too much dependence on today's technology. And you're talking to somebody, a fossil, who doesn't have a computer, doesn't have access to, there's a lot of us still out there, believe it or not, we just hide more. But it's reaching those people. I think if you stop people in town and presented any of this to them, most of them might say, what are you talking about? They don't keep up with it, they don't have a clue. So trying to get them involved where they're interested in it, it's going to be a fun job, but in the long run, it's going to be worthwhile if we can get them on board, or at least attend to find out what's going on. I'm a firm believer, I think we still have to rely on the old school paper trail. Because, like I said, a lot of people, you don't reach them through technology. The only way I find anything, I come up here and look at the agenda on the darn board. I don't know what's going on. But it's, I would like to, I think the idea of, especially like for the Fairview, the core, is to organize meetings in that area. Not necessarily having them go to City Hall. Find locations that are up in the middle of where they live and where this is going to impact people. If it's a schoolroom or somewhere, that you can get folks together and discuss it. Now, in Lombard, I used to live there quite a few years, it's set up differently. It's by districts. So you have a trustee for your district. You elect that trustee. And they used to have meetings, for their district, and it worked pretty well. I mean, people did show up for that. But I think it's important that we address a lot of this to the people that are going to be mostly involved with it. Have it structured and maybe organized, because it's going to turn into a bitch session, I guarantee it. But if you can control it a little bit, maybe you have a piece there. But But if you can get them, but a lot of that's gonna fall on but that's the responsibility of the resident too. We can make them full of education, and then you take it and run with it. It's up to them to follow. We can't take them by the hand and say, come on, we're going to the meeting. So, they have to take accountability for getting involved. So, but I don't think a lot of them know what we've been discussing, any of this. And, but that's the way I think we could handle it. As far as getting out, even we have venues that we could use, old style, as far as posters, signs, whatever. We could use the grand opening at City Hall. We could use the art show downtown. We could use store windows, things like that. Farmers market. We could set up a booth there. You make an attractive looking booth, again, old school, and maybe have it manned by 1 or 2 commissioners or some volunteers, and set up at these different locations. And then move that booth around different towns, north, south, whatever, up in the core group, Fairview, with your paperwork information, so they can pick it up, read it, take it home with them, look at it, and then call all you folks. You're welcome.
Thank you for your thoughts. I appreciate that. And I agree. I think we lean heavily into flyering around town and in different areas, not just downtown, but in areas that are hotspots.
Have you ever dug a hole and put a survey in it?
All right, more to come. Janet, sorry.
Of course. I want to say that it's really great that you're doing this, and the activity and the investment of time and resources to reach out, I think is great. I'm not sure what a pop-up is, for whatever that's worth, but apparently we're going to have a lot of them. The takeaways that I got in no particular order were that, and as someone else said, the goal of ensuring that voices are heard and valued and transparent doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be effective. And I heard somebody say over there that you have multiple people saying the same thing, but we not necessarily be guided by what the residents want and what their experiences are. Ultimately, it's your decision, and I take away that you're going to do whatever you want to do, regardless. And so to what you said. And so I kind of wonder who's guiding DG. Is that the public guiding you, or you're guiding us, or who's leading the parade and what direction it's going? It's a little confusing to me. But I also have a question about how the stakeholders and the small groups, like you were saying, how those folks are selected, and how many they're going to be, and what the criteria are to be part of that. It sounds to me like the end result will be to discount or disenfranchise folks who have shown up over time to be really interested in what's going on and informing ourselves, because those are not the folks that we were particularly going to select for these things. So like the mail part, I think direct mail, I think that has been lacking, and I have a computer, but I'm still a fossil, and I do better with stuff coming in the mail. The other things about the previous plans, I'm hoping that you will take into account the things from the previous plans that didn't turn out the way you thought they might, and don't really work as well as you might have thought in the beginning, and be guided by that information as well, because folks are not, I hear a lot. I encourage people to come and give their opinions, especially when they agree with me, That's not to you might not hear because folks would rather just sit across their coffee tables and complain to each other than let you actually know, identify themselves as being not quite so happy and or pleased and engaging with you. So it's I hope this exercise will, and the energy that you're putting behind and the kind of like friendly activity kinds of things will elicit those kinds of pieces of information. I'm not the only curmudgeon, I promise you. But having said that, I do appreciate what y'all are doing here, and as somebody who is terribly interested in how my tax dollars are spent, I think this is a very well conceived idea, and I'm encouraged by what y'all are doing. So that's what, some A's, some B's, some D's.
Could you explain a pop-up?
Yes, a pop-up is a booth, basically, right? That traveling booth you were talking about. So thinking about the different geographic ranges, right, of existing events, right? Or where, maybe not only an event, I heard like there are community centers, right? And there are schools and other places. So thinking about how we can get in front of a lot of people and engage them in quick hit activities because they're busy, but also so that they feel invested in this plan, right? And know that they are.
It's an opportunity to have a consistent, systemic way of meeting people where they are. That's why things were put on the board like church gatherings and football games, as opposed to expecting someone to come find us at Village Hall. Martin, you had something you want to say?
I just have to say it, because I know you've already got Grove Fest up on the events, but I'm just going to put a stake in the ground. We really, at least this year, have to bring back a council information booth to Rotary Grove Fest. We used to have a booth in the middle of the street where the hundreds, if not thousands of people would come by and express their opinions.
Both of them.
Both of them? Both of their opinions, yes. And if they don't?
They don't.
They don't.
Could there be a hybrid booth then kind of going?
We used to have it for all 4 days, or at least 2 or 3 people there all day long.
Yeah.
People can come by and whatever's on their mind all day long. 100,000 people.
You know, we heard tonight, and we've heard at least since 2009 that I'm aware of, the refrain, I didn't know, you didn't tell me, and you're going to do what you want to do anyway. I've heard that for at least 15 years, through 2 village managers, 3 mayors, and probably 30 or 40 council people. They weren't all in on some scam to try and ignore the residents. It's just not the case. What I would encourage residents to do is reflect on, it depends on how long you've lived here, but TCD1, TCD2, TCD3, the comprehensive plan when we first did it, the second time when we revised it. In all of those instances, there were varying degrees of effort to get input, some more successful than others, and to some degree, some of that input made the list and some of it did not. Not one of those efforts conducted over the last 50 years by 100 volunteers was aimed at trying to ignore residents. It just wasn't, and neither is this. So I hope everybody will remember that. It's part of why I was talking about scope and expectations. It's a really worthwhile exercise that is important and will be used as incumbent and responsible and required, and I think not an option for us to go through this exercise. And we're doing it because we really do want the input. But that doesn't mean that when 60 people come to 4 pop-ups and they all say, I really think you ought to build a Ferris wheel instead of selling that building for apartments, that we're going to build a Ferris wheel. Probably still not going to happen. So just, it's an attempt at setting expectations, because that is, I'm glad you guys said that, because it has been said for as long as I can remember, and it will probably continue to be said. Chris?
Yeah, I think the other thing, because you make a good point about historically there has been communication, I think this effort is also a reflection of the time. There's a lot more noise. We talked about this in the past.
Yeah.
So we have to just do more because there's just more noise out there. So this is encouraging, and I think important work, because you're right. As you were kind of saying, you can lead a horse to water, but sometimes they're just not going to drink. I think we have to just make sure we're telling them where the water is.
Greg?
And to kind of both of your points, I mean, it's not necessarily about the volume, at least as far as I'm concerned. And I mean that both in the context of the amount of feedback and the context of the intensity of the feedback, the sound of it. There have been times where we've had 200 people in Village Hall and nothing they've had to say has swayed a vote. There have been other times where one person has stood up on an issue and said something that was particularly interesting or thought-provoking and changed one, if not many votes. And the same kind of thing has happened from mayors and commissioners. There are times where you walk in thinking you're going to do one thing, and then somebody says, hey, I've got an idea, and things can change pretty quickly. I think the difference is that oftentimes when there's 200 people in the room, people already have their minds made up. And when there's 5 people in the room, on an issue that might not have the same level of notoriety, votes can change, opinions can change. And not as many people happen to be watching at that particular time. So I hope the feedback that we get is voluminous, not just in number, but thought-provoking. It's not necessarily about the people that say, give me a Ferris wheel, or, hey, that ought to be a parking lot. But maybe somebody comes up with an idea that we haven't thought of yet. I think that's what we're all hoping for.
And we are all committed to being part of the process. So please know that, too. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all for staying. Thank you, guys, and good night.